My name is Janet Lewis. I'm 54 years old. And this is the story of how I discovered my husband Marcus wasn't just bringing work home anymore. He was bringing his secretary Vanessa too, and not just for overtime. The evening that changed everything started like any other Wednesday in our suburban Chicago home. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming along to the radio, when I heard Marcus's BMW pull into the driveway. Nothing unusual there. He'd been working late more often lately, something about a big merger at his accounting firm. I trusted him completely. 23 years of marriage will do that to you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What I didn't expect was to hear two car doors slam. I glanced out the kitchen window and saw a sleek red Honda Civic, parked behind Marcus's car. My stomach did a small flip, but I reasoned it away. Maybe a client needed to drop off documents. Maybe one of his colleagues needed a ride. I smoothed down my apron and checked the roast in the oven. The front door opened, and I heard Marcus's familiar laugh followed by a softer, higher-pitched giggle. A woman's laugh. Young, flirtatious. "Janet, honey, we have company," Marcus called out, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness he used when he was nervous. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked toward the foyer. That's when I saw her. Vanessa Richardson. I'd met her briefly at the company Christmas party 6 months ago. She was everything I wasn't anymore. 28 years old, with glossy auburn hair that fell in perfect waves, wearing a fitted black dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her makeup was flawless, her smile bright, and she was standing just a little too close to my husband. "Hi, Miss Lewis," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. Marcus mentioned you were making pot roast, and I said it sounded absolutely divine." I shook her hand, noting how soft it was, how perfectly painted her nails were. "Of course not," I heard myself say, though something cold was settling in my chest. "There's always plenty." Marcus loosened his tie, avoiding my eyes. "Vanessa's been working on the Henderson account with me. We've been putting in some serious overtime, and I thought, well, home-cooked meals are so much better than takeout." I smiled and nodded, playing the perfect hostess. But my mind was racing. In 23 years of marriage, Marcus had never once brought a colleague home for dinner without asking me first. He was methodical, planned everything. This spontaneous invitation felt wrong. "Let me just set another place at the table," I said, retreating to the kitchen. As I pulled out the good china, the plates we only used for special occasions, I could hear them talking in the living room. Their voices were low, intimate. I caught fragments of conversation that had nothing to do with accounting. Something about a movie she'd seen, a restaurant she wanted to try, how funny he was during their coffee break. I stood there holding a dinner plate, staring at my reflection in its white surface, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger yet, but awareness, like waking up from a dream you didn't realize you were having. I set the table carefully, arranging the silverware with military precision. When I called them to dinner, they came in laughing about some inside joke. Vanessa complimented the house, the flowers I'd arranged, the smell of the roast. She was charming. I had to give her that. "Marcus tells me you used to work in marketing before you got married," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "That's right," I replied, serving the roast onto their plates. "I worked at Davidson and Associates for 5 years. "Oh, how wonderful. I bet you miss it sometimes." There was something in her tone, a subtle condescension that made my jaw tighten, like she was talking to someone's grandmother about the old days. "Sometimes," I said simply, though the truth was more complicated than that. I had loved my job. I was good at it. I'd won awards, managed major campaigns, had a corner office with a view of the lake. But when Marcus got his promotion and we started trying for kids, it made sense for me to stay home. We'd planned it all out. The children would come. I'd be there for every milestone. And eventually, when they were older, I'd go back to work. Except the children never came. Year after year of trying, of tests, of procedures, of hope followed by crushing disappointment. The spare bedroom that was supposed to be a nursery became my craft room instead. The career I'd put on hold stretched into a decade. Then, by the time I thought about going back, the industry had changed. Technology had moved on, and I was just another middle-aged woman with a gap in her resume. Marcus had never said I was holding him back, but I felt it sometimes. The way he'd come home talking about his dynamic young team, the fresh ideas they brought to the table, the energy in the office. I'd become the wife who had dinner waiting, who managed the household, who made sure his shirts were pressed and his golf clubs were clean. Janet makes the best pot roast in Illinois, Marcus said, cutting into his meat. I've been bragging about it for weeks. It really is incredible, Vanessa agreed, but she was looking at Marcus when she said it, not at me. I watched them eat the dinner I'd spent 2 hours preparing, watched the way she laughed at his jokes, the way he leaned in when she spoke. I noticed how she touched his arm when she made a point, how his eyes lingered on her face, how they seemed to have forgotten I was even there. That's when I realized I wasn't having dinner with my husband and his colleague. I was serving dinner to my husband and his mistress. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral, kept refilling their wine glasses, kept asking polite questions about their work. Inside, I was cataloging everything. The way Marcus kept checking his phone and smiling at messages, the way Vanessa knew exactly how he liked his coffee without asking, the way they finished each other's sentences. After dinner, I cleared the table while they moved to the living room. I could hear them through the kitchen door, their voices getting softer, more intimate. I loaded the dishwasher mechanically, my hands moving without conscious thought while my mind processed what I'd witnessed. When I finally joined them in the living room, they were sitting on the couch, not quite touching but close enough that I could see the electricity between them. They sprang apart slightly when I entered, and Marcus jumped up. We should probably call it a night, he said quickly. Early morning tomorrow. Vanessa gathered her purse, a designer bag I recognized from the boutique downtown. Thank you so much for dinner, Janet. It was lovely. You're welcome, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my head. Feel free to come by any time. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I just might take you up on that. After they left, I stood in the kitchen staring at the 3 dirty wine glasses on the counter. 3 glasses for 3 people, but I'd barely touched. I'd been too busy watching, too busy seeing what I'd probably been blind to for months. I poured myself a full glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the remnants of the evening. The good china I'd washed and put away, the cloth napkins I'd folded so carefully, the fresh flowers I'd bought that morning to make the house look perfect. When Marcus came back inside, he found me there. Great evening, he said, loosening his tie. Vanessa really appreciated the hospitality. I'm sure she did, I said quietly. He paused, studying my face. You okay? You seem a little off. I looked at my husband of 23 years. This man I'd built a life with. This man I'd sacrificed my career for. This man who'd just brought his girlfriend to our home and made me cook for her. I'm fine, I said. Just tired. She nodded. Already distracted. Already thinking about tomorrow. I'll probably be working late again. This Henderson account is really demanding. I'm sure it is. He kissed the top of my head absently and headed upstairs. I sat there for another hour finishing my wine, thinking about everything I'd seen and heard. By the time I went to bed, Marcus was already asleep, his phone charging on the nightstand beside him. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to demand explanations, to scream and cry and throw things. But another part of me, the part that had learned to be strategic during my marketing days, knew that wasn't the smartest move. If I was right about what was happening, if Marcus was having an affair with Vanessa, then I needed to be smart about how I handled it. I needed evidence. I needed a plan. The next morning, Marcus was already gone when I woke up. There was a note on the kitchen counter. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. 2 words that felt like stones in my chest. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the note. 23 years of marriage. And it had come to this. Post-it note, affection and dinner parties for his mistress. I thought about calling my sister Linda, telling her everything, asking for advice. But Linda had never liked Marcus, had always thought I could do better. She'd probably tell me to pack my bags and leave immediately. That wasn't what I needed to hear right now. Instead, I did what I'd always done when I needed to think clearly. I made a list. Things I knew for certain. Marcus was spending more time at work. He'd been distracted lately, checking his phone constantly. He'd brought Vanessa to our home without asking me first. The way they looked at each other wasn't professional. Things I suspected. They were having an affair. It had been going on for months. Last night wasn't the first time they'd been alone together. Things I needed to find out. How long had this been going on? How serious was it? What were Marcus's intentions? I spent the morning researching private investigators online, reading articles about infidelity, learning about my legal rights. I wasn't ready to hire anyone yet, but I wanted to understand my options. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Lunch meeting ran long. We'll grab dinner with the team. Home late. I stared at the message, wondering if the team included Vanessa, wondering if they were at some romantic restaurant right now, holding hands across the table talking about their future together. I was still staring at my phone when it buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Hi Janet. It's Vanessa. I got your number from Marcus's phone. I hope that's okay. I wanted to thank you again for last night. The dinner was absolutely perfect. My hands started shaking. She had gotten my number from Marcus's phone. My husband had given his secretary my contact information, or she'd taken it herself while he wasn't looking. Either way, it felt like a violation. I typed back, "You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it." Her response came immediately. "I was wondering if you'd like to have lunch sometime this week. I'd love to get to know you better." I stared at the message, feeling like I was in some kind of surreal nightmare. The woman who was sleeping with my husband wanted to have lunch with me. The audacity of it was breathtaking. But then I thought about it more strategically. If Vanessa wanted to have lunch with me, maybe it was an opportunity. Maybe I could learn something useful. I typed back, "That sounds lovely. When were you thinking? How about Friday? There's a cute little cafe downtown, Rosario's. Do you know it?" I knew it. It was the kind of place young professionals went for expensive salads and artisanal coffee. Not my usual scene, but I could adapt. Perfect. What time? Noon. See you then. I set my phone down and sat back in my chair. I'd just agreed to have lunch with my husband's mistress. 6 months ago. If someone had told me I'd be in this situation, I would have laughed. My life was stable, predictable, safe. Marcus and I had our routines, our comfortable existence. We weren't passionate anymore, but we were solid, or so I'd thought. Now I was wondering how long I'd been living in a fantasy, how long I'd been the only one who believed in our marriage. I spent the rest of the week watching Marcus more carefully. I noticed things I'd missed before. The way he showered immediately when he got home from work, the way he kept his phone face down at dinner, the way he'd started wearing cologne again, something he hadn't done in years. I also noticed how he looked at me, or rather how he didn't look at me. When I spoke, his eyes would drift to his phone or the TV. When I touched his arm, he'd pull away absently. When I tried to initiate any kind of physical contact, he'd find an excuse to leave the room. It was like I'd become invisible in my own home. Friday came faster than I expected. I spent an hour getting ready for lunch, trying on different outfits, doing my makeup more carefully than usual. I wanted to look good, but I also wanted to look like someone who belonged in Vanessa's world. I arrived at Rosario's 5 minutes early, and was surprised to find Vanessa already there, sitting at a corner table with a perfect view of the street. She waved when she saw me, her smile bright and welcoming. "Janet, you look wonderful," she said, standing to hug me. I hugged her back, noting her perfume, the same scent I'd been smelling on Marcus's shirts lately. "Thank you for suggesting this place," I said, settling into the chair across from her. "It's charming. I come here all the time," she said, signaling the waitress. "Marcus brought me here once. Actually," he said, "you'd love it." The casualness of it, the way she mentioned Marcus like he was a mutual friend rather than my husband, made my stomach clench. But I kept my expression neutral. "He has good taste," I said. We ordered salads and coffee, making small talk about the weather, the neighborhood, the restaurant's decor. Vanessa was easy to talk to. I had to admit, she was intelligent, funny, engaging. Under different circumstances, I might have actually liked her. "You know," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee, "I have to tell you how much I admire your marriage." I nearly choked on my water. "I'm sorry, you and Marcus. You have such a solid partnership. He talks about you all the time at work." "He does?" "Oh yeah, he's always saying how supportive you are, how you take care of everything at home, so he can focus on his career. He's very grateful for that." I felt like I was in some kind of alternate universe. "That's nice to hear. I envy what you have, actually. The stability, the history." 23 years is incredible. I studied her face, looking for signs of mockery or cruelty, but she seemed genuinely sincere. Either she was an excellent actress, or she was delusional. "Marriage takes work," I said, carefully. "I'm sure it does. But you make it look so easy. The way you had everything perfect the other night, the beautiful dinner, the lovely home. You're like the perfect wife." The perfect wife. The words hit me like a slap. Is that what I'd become? The perfect wife, who cooked perfect dinners, and kept a perfect house while her husband cheated on her. "I do my best," I said, my voice tight. "Marcus is so lucky to have you," Vanessa continued. "I told him that the other night, after dinner. I said, 'Marcus, you have no idea how good you have it.' And what did he say?" "He agreed completely. He said, he doesn't know what he'd do without you." I excused myself to go to the bathroom, needing a moment to process what I'd just heard. In the mirror, I looked at my reflection and saw a woman I barely recognized. When had I become this person? When had I stopped being Janet Lewis, the marketing executive who'd won awards and commanded respect, and become Janet Lewis, the perfect wife who made pot roast and kept her mouth shut? When I returned to the table, Vanessa was checking her phone. "Sorry," she said, sliding it back into her purse. "Work never stops." "I remember that feeling," I said. "From your marketing days. Marcus told me you were quite successful." "I was. Do you ever miss it? The excitement, the challenges?" I thought about it. Sometimes. But life takes you in different directions. It must be nice though, having the freedom to pursue your interests. I'm so busy with work, I barely have time for anything else. "What interests you outside of work?" She smiled. "Travel, mostly. I love discovering new places, new experience. Life's too short to stay in one place, you know." I nodded, though I didn't really understand. I'd been in the same place for 23 years, building a life, creating stability. The idea of constantly moving, constantly seeking new experiences, seemed exhausting. "Where would you like to travel?" I asked. "Everywhere. Europe, Asia, South America. I want to see the world before I settle down." "And when do you think you'll settle down?" She shrugged. "When I find the right person, I suppose. Someone who understands that I'm not ready to give up my dreams for a traditional life." Traditional life, you know? The suburban house, the routine, the predictability. That works for some people, but I need more excitement. I felt like she was describing my life as some kind of prison sentence. The suburban house, Marcus and I had bought together, the routine we'd built over 2 decades, the predictability that had once felt like security. Have you found someone who understands that? I asked. She glanced around the restaurant, then leaned forward slightly. I think so. There's someone at work who gets it. He's not quite ready to make any big changes yet, but I think he will be soon. My heart started pounding. Someone at work? I probably shouldn't say anything. It's complicated. Complicated how? She bit her lip, like she was deciding whether to trust me. He's married, but it's not a happy marriage. He's been feeling trapped for years, going through the motions. He wants something more, something real. I felt like I was going to be sick. That sounds difficult. It is, but sometimes you have to follow your heart, even when it's messy. Life's too short to stay in a situation that makes you miserable. And his wife? How does she factor into this? Vanessa looked uncomfortable for the first time since I'd arrived. She's a little older, very traditional. I don't think she really understands him anymore. They've grown apart. Maybe they could work on their marriage, get counseling. Some marriages can't be saved, she said quietly. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let go. I sat there looking at this young woman, who was calmly telling me that my marriage was over, that my husband was miserable, that I was the obstacle standing in the way of true love. The worst part was how reasonable she made it sound, how inevitable. What if the wife doesn't want to let go? I asked. Then it gets messier. But ultimately, people have to choose their own happiness. You can't force someone to stay in a marriage they don't want to be in. No, I said quietly. I suppose you can't. We finished lunch making small talk about work and the weather. Vanessa paid the check, insisting it was her treat. As we walked to our cars, she hugged me again. Thank you for lunch, she said. I hope we can do this again soon. I'm sure we will, I said, though I had no intention of ever seeing her again if I could help it. I drove home in a daze, replaying every word of our conversation. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I felt like I'd been turned inside out. Everything I'd believed about my life, my marriage, my future had been quietly dismantled over Caesar salad and coffee. That evening, Marcus came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen starting dinner when he walked in. Hey, he said, kissing my cheek absently. How was your day? Fine, I said, stirring the sauce on the stove. I had lunch with Vanessa. He froze. You what? Vanessa. She invited me to lunch. We went to Rosario's. Why would she do that? I turned to look at him, noting the panic in his eyes. She said she wanted to get to know me better. She thinks very highly of our marriage. Our marriage? She said you talk about me all the time at work, about how supportive I am, how I take care of everything so you can focus on your career. Marcus relaxed slightly. Well, that's true. She also said you're very grateful for the stability our marriage provides. I am, but not happy. What? I turned off the stove and faced him fully. She said you're not happy, Marcus. She said you feel trapped, that you're just going through the motions. His face went pale. She said that? She said a lot of things, about following your heart, about not staying in situations that make you miserable, about how some marriages can't be saved. Marcus sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Janet? I said, how long has it been going on? He didn't answer immediately, and in that silence, I heard everything I needed to know. How long, Marcus? 4 months, he said quietly. 4 months, a third of a year. While I'd been planning our summer vacation, organizing his mother's birthday party, taking care of everything that made our life run smoothly, he'd been building a relationship with another woman. Do you love her? Another pause. I don't know. Maybe. It's complicated. What's complicated about it? She's young, Janet. She wants things, experiences. She makes me feel like I'm not just some middle-aged guy stuck in a routine. And I do. You make me feel safe, stable. But sometimes I wonder if that's enough. I stared at my husband, this man I'd spent half my life with, and realized I was looking at a stranger. When had he become someone who valued excitement over commitment? When had our stability become his prison? What do you want, Marcus? I don't know. I thought I did. But after talking to Vanessa today. You talked to Vanessa today? She called me after lunch. She was upset. She said she might have said too much. What did you tell her? That I needed time to think. About what? About us. About what I want. I turned back to the stove, mechanically stirring the sauce that was already perfect. And what do you think you want? I want to be happy, Janet. I want to feel alive again. And you can't feel that with me. I don't know. Can you honestly say you're happy? Really happy? I thought about it. Was I happy? I was content. I was comfortable. I had a nice house. A stable life. A husband who came home every night. But was I happy? I thought I was. I said finally. Maybe we both deserve more than I thought I was. I turned off the stove and walked upstairs, leaving Marcus sitting at the kitchen table. In our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at the life we'd built together. The photos on the dresser, the matching furniture we'd picked out 15 years ago, the curtains I'd sewn myself. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. In the space of one lunch conversation, my entire world had shifted. I wasn't the perfect wife anymore. I was the obstacle, the thing standing in the way of my husband's happiness. I thought about Vanessa's words. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let go, but I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Not without a fight. I pulled out my laptop and started researching divorce lawyers, not because I wanted a divorce, but because I needed to understand what I was facing, what I might lose, what I might gain. As I scrolled through law firm websites, reading about asset division and spousal support, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness. Exactly. But something sharper. Something that felt like the beginning of a plan. Marcus wanted to feel alive again. He wanted excitement. I could give him that. Just not in the way he expected. The next morning, I woke up before Marcus and made coffee. When he came downstairs, I was already dressed and ready for the day. I've been thinking about what you said, I told him. He looked hopeful. And? I think you're right. We both deserve to be happy. Really? Really? So I have a proposition for you. He sat down across from me, looking wary. What kind of proposition? I want to meet with you and Vanessa, together. I want to understand what you both want, what you're both thinking. I want to have an honest conversation about the future. Janet, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? If we're going to make decisions about our marriage, shouldn't we all be part of the conversation? It's not that simple. It is that simple. You, me, and Vanessa, dinner. Tomorrow night. Here. I'll cook. We'll have a nice meal and talk like adults about what everyone wants. Marcus looked like he was about to argue, but something in my expression stopped him. If that's what you want, it's what I want. I'll ask Vanessa. Don't ask her. Tell her. 7 o'clock tomorrow night. I spent the rest of the day planning the menu, shopping for ingredients, preparing for what would either be the most important dinner party of my life or the most spectacular disaster. Either way, it was going to be memorable. That evening, Marcus called Vanessa while I was folding laundry upstairs. I could hear his voice through the bedroom floor, tense and urgent. He was trying to convince her to come to dinner, explaining that I wanted to have an adult conversation about everything. I couldn't make out her responses, but the conversation went on for nearly 20 minutes. When he came upstairs, he looked exhausted. She'll come, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed, but she's not happy about it. I'm sure she's not, I said, continuing to fold his shirts with mechanical precision. This probably wasn't part of her plan. Janet, what are you trying to accomplish here? I looked at him, this man who'd shared my bed for over 2 decades, who'd promised to love and honor me through better and worse. I'm trying to understand what's happening to our marriage. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything left worth fighting for, and if there isn't, then at least we'll all know where we stand. Marcus nodded slowly, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He was beginning to realize that his compliant, predictable wife might not be as predictable as he'd thought. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. I cleaned the house until it sparkled, arranged fresh flowers in every room, polished the silver candlesticks we'd received as a wedding gift. I wanted everything to be perfect, not for them, but for me. I wanted to feel like I was in control of something, even if it was just the place setting. I chose the menu carefully. Beef tenderloin with red wine reduction, roasted vegetables, and chocolate mousse for dessert. It was elegant without being ostentatious, the kind of meal that would impress Vanessa but also remind her that I'd been the woman of this house for 23 years. At 5:30 I went upstairs to get ready. I'd bought a new dress that afternoon, something I hadn't done in months. It was navy blue, fitted but not tight, sophisticated without trying too hard. I did my makeup more carefully than usual, chose jewelry that Marcus had given me for our anniversary years ago. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I'd almost forgotten existed. Not the tired housewife in yoga pants and oversized sweaters, but Janet Lewis, the woman who'd once commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals. Marcus came home at 6:30, clearly nervous. He showered and changed into his best suit, the one he wore to client dinners and company events. When he saw me, he paused. "You look beautiful," he said, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. "Thank you," I said simply. Vanessa arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. I watched through the front window as she sat in her car for several minutes, probably gathering her courage. When she finally walked to the front door, she was wearing a cream-colored wrap dress and heels that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in 6 months. I opened the door before she could knock. "Vanessa," I said warmly, "thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," she replied, though her smile was strained. "This is very civilized of you. I believe in handling things like adults," I said, leading her into the living room, where Marcus was waiting with a bottle of wine already open. The first few minutes were awkward, filled with stilted conversation about the weather and Vanessa's drive over. But as we moved to the dining room and I served the first course, something shifted. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was the formal setting, but we all seemed to relax slightly. "This is delicious," Vanessa said, taking a bite of the tenderloin. "You're an amazing cook." "I've had lots of practice," I said. 23 years of dinner parties and holiday meals. "It shows." "Marcus is lucky to have someone who takes such good care of him." I glanced at Marcus, who was focused intently on his plate. "He is, isn't he, Janet?" Marcus said quietly. "Maybe we should talk about why we're here." "Of course," I said, setting down my fork. "I think we should all be honest about what we want." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Mrs. Lewis, I want you to know that I never intended for things to get so complicated. Please, call me Janet, and I'm sure you didn't. These things rarely start with clear intentions, do they?" "No, they don't. So tell me, when did it start? When did you first realize you had feelings for my husband?" Vanessa glanced at Marcus, who gave her a small nod. "It was about 6 months ago. We were working late on a project, and we started talking about our lives, our dreams." Marcus mentioned that he felt like he was going through the motions, that he wondered if there was more to life than just routine. "And you felt drawn to that?" I understood. "I've seen what happens when people settle, when they stop challenging themselves. My parents had that kind of marriage. They were comfortable, but they weren't truly alive." I nodded thoughtfully. "And you don't want that for yourself?" "No, I don't. And I don't think Marcus wants that either." "Marcus," I said, turning to my husband, "is that how you feel, like our marriage is just settling?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes, we have a good life, Janet, but I wonder if good is enough anymore." "What would be enough?" "Passion, excitement, feeling like each day might bring something unexpected. And you can't have that with me." "We've tried, haven't we? We've talked about traveling, about me maybe switching careers, about you going back to work, but we never actually do anything. We just talk about it, and then go back to the same routines." I considered this. "You're right, we do talk about changes, but never make them." "Exactly. With Vanessa, I feel like anything is possible." I looked at Vanessa, who was watching this exchange with fascination and guilt. "And what do you see as possible, Vanessa?" "I see a man who's intelligent and funny and successful, who deserves to be with someone who appreciates those qualities." "And you don't think I appreciate them? I think you take them for granted." "The way he talks about your relationship, it sounds like you're more like roommates than lovers." The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. Marcus and I had fallen into patterns over the years, comfortable routines that felt safe but weren't particularly passionate. "That's a fair assessment," I said quietly. "Marriage does become routine after a while." "It doesn't have to," Vanessa said earnestly. "My aunt and uncle have been married for 30 years, and they still act like newlyweds. They travel together, They try new things. They support each other's dreams. That sounds wonderful, I said. And what are your dreams, Vanessa? To see the world, to build a career that means something, to be with someone who wants to grow and explore with me. And you think Marcus shares those dreams? I know he does. We've talked about it extensively. I turned back to Marcus. Have you talked about your shared dreams? Yes. Vanessa makes me remember what it felt like to have ambitions beyond just getting through each day. What kind of ambitions? Travel, like she said. Maybe starting our own consulting firm, taking risks, making real changes instead of just talking about them. I served the second course, a salad with pears and walnuts, while I processed what I was hearing. My husband had been planning a future with another woman, a future that included professional risks and international travel and passion. It sounds like you've given this a lot of thought, I said. We have, Vanessa said, but we also know it's complicated. We don't want to hurt you unnecessarily. How considerate, I said, and I meant it. There was something almost admirable about their honesty, even if it was destroying my life. Janet, Marcus said, I want you to know that none of this is about you not being good enough. You're a wonderful woman. You'd make someone very happy. Just not you anymore. I don't think I make you happy anymore either. When was the last time you were genuinely excited about something we did together? I thought about it honestly. It's been a while. We've both been going through the motions. Maybe it's time to admit that we want different things. What do you want from me? I asked. Marcus and Vanessa exchanged glances. We want you to consider the possibility that ending our marriage might be the best thing for everyone, Marcus said. Including me? Especially you. You deserve to find someone who makes you feel alive again, who appreciates everything you have to offer. I almost laughed. Here was my husband of 23 years, sitting at our dining room table with his girlfriend, trying to convince me that divorce would be good for me. And what would this divorce look like? I asked. Amicable, Vanessa said quickly. Respectful. Marcus would make sure you're taken care of financially. How generous of him, I said. And where would I live while you two pursue your dreams? We'd work that out fairly, Marcus said. Maybe you could keep the house, or we could sell it and split the proceeds. And your consulting firm? What about it? Would I be entitled to any part of that, since you'll presumably be using contacts and experience you gained during our marriage? Marcus looked uncomfortable. We'd have to discuss that with lawyers. Yes, I cleared the salad plates and returned with the chocolate mousse. Both Marcus and Vanessa complimented the dessert, but the mood had shifted. We were no longer having a philosophical discussion about love and marriage. We were negotiating the terms of my life's dissolution. I have a question, I said, serving coffee. What makes you think I'll just quietly agree to this? What do you mean? Vanessa asked. You're asking me to give up my husband, my home, my financial security, so that you two can pursue your dreams together. What makes you think I'll cooperate? Marcus frowned. Because forcing someone to stay in a marriage they don't want is cruel and pointless. Is it? Or is it holding people accountable for the commitments they made? Janet, you can't seriously want to stay married to someone who's in love with someone else, can't? What if I decide that 23 years of marriage is worth fighting for? What if I decide that I'm not ready to give up on us? Then you'll make everyone miserable, Vanessa said. Including myself? Especially yourself. I sipped my coffee, studying both of their faces. They looked like parents trying to convince a stubborn child to accept an unpleasant but necessary truth. You know what I find interesting? I said. You're both so certain that this is the right choice, that your feelings for each other are worth destroying a marriage over. But neither of you has considered what happens if those feelings change. They won't, Vanessa said firmly. How can you be sure? You've been together for 4 months. I've been with Marcus for 23 years. I've seen him through job losses, family deaths, health scares, financial stress. I know who he is when life gets difficult. Do you? I know enough, she said, but there was less certainty in her voice. Do you know that he gets depressed every winter and needs constant reassurance? Do you know that he's terrible with money when he's stressed? Do you know that he has panic attacks when he feels trapped and lashes out at the people closest to him? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Those aren't really fair examples, aren't they? Marriage isn't just about passion and dreams, Marcus. It's about dealing with reality together. It's about choosing to love someone even when they're not at their best. But you don't choose to love me anymore, he said quietly. You just endure me. The words hit harder than I expected. Is that really what you think? Isn't it true? When was the last time you looked at me and felt anything other than resignation? I considered the question honestly. When was the last time you gave me a reason to feel anything else? That's not fair, isn't it? You say I take you for granted. But when was the last time you did something that surprised me? When was the last time you planned something special for us? When was the last time you told me I looked beautiful without me fishing for compliments? I told you that tonight because I made an effort. When was the last time you noticed when I didn't make an effort? Marcus was quiet. You want to know why our marriage feels routine? I continued. Because you stopped trying years ago. You stopped seeing me as someone worth impressing. I became the person who took care of things, so you didn't have to think about them. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you bought me flowers that weren't for an occasion? When was the last time you suggested we do something together that wasn't watching TV? When was the last time you initiated any kind of intimacy? We grew comfortable with each other, you grew lazy, and now you've found someone new and exciting. And suddenly you remember what effort feels like. Vanessa had been quiet during this exchange. But now she spoke up. Maybe that proves that you're not right for each other anymore. Or maybe it proves that he's going to do the same thing to you that he did to me, I said. Give you his best effort in the beginning, then gradually stop trying as the relationship becomes established. That won't happen. How do you know? Have you asked his first wife? Both Marcus and Vanessa looked confused. I'm his first wife, I said. But before me, there was Sarah, his college girlfriend. They lived together for 3 years. He was going to propose, but then he met me and decided I was more exciting. Marcus's face went pale. That's not what happened. Isn't it? You told me yourself that things with Sarah had gotten stale, that you felt like you were just going through the motions. Sound familiar? That was completely different, was it? Or is this just your pattern? Get comfortable, get bored, find someone new. Vanessa was staring at Marcus with a new expression. You never told me about Sarah. It wasn't relevant. A 3-year relationship wasn't relevant. It was over before I met you. But it ended the same way this is ending. With you deciding that comfort wasn't enough. Sarah and I were kids, Marcus said. We didn't know what we wanted. And you think you know now? At 51, you think you've finally figured out what you want? I think I deserve a chance to find out. And what about what I deserve? The question hung in the air. Finally, Vanessa spoke. You deserve to find someone who chooses you, she said quietly. Someone who doesn't have to convince himself to love you. I looked at her. This young woman, who thought she understood love and marriage, and life. You're right, I said. I do deserve that. Marcus looked relieved. So you'll consider the divorce? I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? I stood up and began clearing the dessert plates. I'm saying that you two have given me a lot to think about. Thank you for being so honest about your feelings and your plans. Janet, Marcus said. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that this has been a very illuminating evening. Vanessa and Marcus exchanged worried glances. What happens now, Vanessa? Now you go home, and I clean up, and we all sleep on everything we've discussed tonight, and then, I smiled, then we see what tomorrow brings. After they left, I did clean up, slowly and methodically. I washed the good china by hand, dried it carefully, and put it away. I wiped down the table, blew out the candles, and put the flowers in the refrigerator to keep them fresh. Then I went upstairs to my computer, and spent the next 3 hours, researching everything I could about Illinois divorce law, community property, and spousal support. I learned about fault versus no-fault divorce, about discovery proceedings, about asset valuation. I also researched Marcus's company, looking up recent financial reports, employee directories, and client lists. I discovered that Vanessa's position as Marcus's secretary was actually quite junior, despite her confident demeanor. She'd been with the company for less than 2 years, and her salary was modest. I researched her too, finding her social media profiles, her college transcripts, her employment history. She was intelligent and ambitious, but also young and inexperienced. She'd never been married, never owned property, never faced the kind of long-term financial planning that comes with middle age. By the time I went to bed, I had a much clearer picture of what I was dealing with. Marcus had convinced himself that he was in love, but what he really loved was feeling young and desired again. Vanessa was attracted to his stability and success, but she had no real understanding of what it took to build and maintain those things. They thought they were choosing love over security, passion over routine. What they were really choosing was fantasy over reality. The next morning, I woke up before Marcus and made coffee. When he came downstairs, he found me sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, and a stack of papers beside me. "You're up early," he said cautiously. "I've been busy," I said, closing the laptop. "Researching our options." "What kind of options?" "Legal options, financial options, personal options." He poured himself coffee and sat down across from me. "And what did you find?" "I found that Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, which means neither of us has to prove wrongdoing to get divorced. I also found that we live in an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets get divided fairly, though not necessarily equally." "Okay. I found that I'm entitled to spousal support, especially given that I sacrificed my career to support yours. The amount and duration would depend on various factors, including the length of our marriage and our respective earning capacities." Marcus was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Janet, where is this going?" "I also found that any business started during the marriage using marital assets or knowledge gained during the marriage would be considered marital property." "What does that mean?" "It means your consulting firm with Vanessa would be partially mine." His face went white. "That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" I laughed. "Is it fair that I gave up my career to support yours? Is it fair that I spent 23 years building a life with someone who now wants to throw it away? Is it fair that you brought your girlfriend to our home and made me serve her dinner? I didn't make you do anything." "Didn't you? You put me in an impossible position. Play the perfect hostess to your mistress, or look like the bitter, jealous wife. I never meant for it to happen that way. But it did happen that way. And now you want me to gracefully step aside, so you can start your new life without any inconvenience. I want us both to be happy." "No, Marcus, you want you to be happy. You want me to make your happiness as easy as possible, just like I've been doing for 23 years. He was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand what you're asking me to give up. I want you to understand what it cost to rebuild a life at 54. I want you to understand that your choices have consequences. I do understand that." "Do you?" "Let me explain it to you." I opened one of the folders beside me. "This is a breakdown of our assets. The house, your retirement account, my retirement account, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio. Do you know what my half would be worth?" "I assume we'd split things fairly." "My half would be worth about $400,000. Do you know what that means for a 54-year-old woman with no recent work experience?" "You could find work." "Doing what?" "I've been out of the marketing field for over 20 years. The industry has completely changed. I'd be starting over at entry level, competing with people half my age." "You're intelligent and capable. You'd figure it out." "Maybe I would. But let's say I found a job making $40,000 a year, which would be optimistic. After taxes, that's about $30,000. Do you know what it cost to live on $30,000 a year, when you're used to living on 150? Marcus was staring at his coffee cup. "You'd get spousal support." "For how long?" 5 years. "And what happens when you decide Vanessa isn't exciting enough anymore, and you want to start over again? What happens to my support then?" "That won't happen." "You said the same thing about us." I pulled out another folder. "This is information about Vanessa. Did you know she has $40,000 in student loan debt? Did you know she's been living paycheck to paycheck? Did you know she's never owned property or made a long-term financial plan?" "What does that have to do with anything?" "It has to do with the fact that she's looking at you as her financial security. She's not just in love with you, Marcus. She's in love with what you can provide for her." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Look at the timeline. She started pursuing you right after she found out about your promotion and the bonus that came with it. She started talking about dreams and travel right after you mentioned the consulting firm idea. You're being paranoid. Or am I being realistic about a 28-year-old woman who sees a successful man as her ticket to the life she wants? Marcus stood up abruptly. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you attack Vanessa. I'm not attacking her. I'm pointing out facts you've chosen to ignore because they don't fit the romantic narrative you've created. She loves me. Maybe she does, but she also loves what you represent: security, success, a way out of her ordinary life. And what's wrong with that? Nothing. As long as you understand that's what it is, but don't pretend this is some great love story when it's really a business transaction. Marcus headed for the door. I'm going to work, Marcus, I called after him. Think about what we discussed. Really think about it, because whatever you decide, I'm not going to make it easy for you. He paused at the door. What does that mean? It means, if you want a divorce, you're going to pay for it, literally and figuratively. I'm not going to quietly disappear so you can have your midlife crisis without consequences. Janet, don't do this. Don't do what? Protect myself, look out for my own interests. Isn't that what you're doing? He left without answering, and I spent the morning making phone calls. I called 3 different divorce attorneys, setting up consultation. I called a financial planner who specialized in divorce settlements. I called a private investigator. Then I called my sister Linda. Janet, she said, clearly surprised to hear from me so early. What's wrong? Marcus is having an affair. Silence. Then, that bastard. I always knew he was too good to be true. Linda. No. Seriously, 23 years. And he's throwing it away for what? Some young secretary? How did you know she was young? Men his age. They get scared of getting old. So they find some girl who makes them feel powerful again. She's 28. Of course she is, and I bet she thinks he's going to leave you and marry her. That seems to be the plan. How's she going to feel when she realizes what it actually costs to be married to a middle-aged man? The doctor visits, the blood pressure medication, the boring conversations about 401k contributions. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. You're terrible. I'm practical. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. I'm researching my options. Good. Don't let him steamroll you. You gave up everything for that man. And he owes you. I know. Do you need me to come up there? I can be there by tonight. Not yet, but I might need you soon. Just say the word. I've been waiting 23 years to tell Marcus exactly what I think of him. After I hung up, I felt better than I had in days. Linda was right. I had given up everything for Marcus. And he did owe me. Not just financially, but morally. I spent the afternoon at the first attorney consultation. The lawyer, a sharp woman in her 40s named Patricia Brennan, listened to my story without judgment. You have a strong case for spousal support, she said. 23-year marriage, significant career sacrifice, substantial income disparity. The court would likely award you long-term, possibly permanent support, and the business. If he starts it while you're still married, using contacts or experience gained during the marriage, you'd have a claim to it. We'd need to document everything carefully. What about the house? You could petition to keep it, with him buying out your half, or you could force a sale and split the proceeds. Given your employment situation, the court might favor letting you keep the house. How long would all this take? Depends on how cooperative he is. If he fights everything, it could take years. Divorce litigation can be very lengthy, especially when there are significant assets involved. I thought about Marcus and Vanessa, planning their exciting new life together, and smiled. How lengthy? Exactly. 2 to 3 years isn't uncommon for contested cases, and during that time, you'd remain married. He'd be required to maintain the marital standard of living. He couldn't dispose of major assets without court approval. I made my decision. I want to fight everything. Patricia raised an eyebrow. That could get expensive. How expensive? 50 to 100,000 in legal fees. Possibly more. Worth every penny, I said. That evening, Marcus came home later than usual. He found me in the living room, reading. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" "About this morning. About what you said." I closed my book and looked at him. "What about it?" "I've been thinking about what you said, about Vanessa and her motivations, and I think you might be partially right. Only partially. I think she does love me, but I also think she's attracted to the security I can provide." "That's very perceptive of you." He sat down across from me. "But that doesn't change how I feel about us." "No? Even if Vanessa's motives aren't completely pure, it doesn't mean our marriage is worth saving." "Interesting. I've made up my mind, Janet. I want a divorce." I nodded calmly. "I figured you would. I hope we can do this amicably." "I'm sure you do." "What does that mean?" I stood up and walked to the bookshelf, where I'd placed the business cards from the 3 attorneys I'd consulted. "It means I've hired Patricia Brennan to represent me." Marcus's face went pale. "Patricia Brennan? She's the most aggressive divorce attorney in the city." "Yes. She is." "Janet, that's not necessary. We can work this out between ourselves." "No, Marcus, we can't, because what you consider fair and what I consider fair are 2 very different things." "What do you want?" "I want everything I'm entitled to under Illinois law. I want spousal support that reflects the 23 years I spent supporting your career. I want my share of all marital assets, including any business ventures you pursue during the divorce proceedings." "That could take years." "Yes, you're going to destroy both of us financially." "No, Marcus, you're going to destroy us financially. I'm just going to make sure I get my fair share of the destruction." He stood up, running his hands through his hair. "This is insane. We can be reasonable adults about this." I tried, reasonable. "I cooked dinner for you and your girlfriend, and listened to you explain why our marriage wasn't worth fighting for." "That was reasonable." "So what is this?" "This is me fighting for what's mine, and if it ruins any chance of us staying friendly." "We stopped being friends the moment you decided Vanessa was more important than the vows you made to me." Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him really seeing me for the first time in years. Not the compliant wife who made his life easier, but the woman who'd given up her own ambitions to support his, who'd built his comfortable life, who wasn't going to give it all up without a fight. "I'll call my attorney tomorrow," he said finally. "You do that," I said, picking up my book again. "And Marcus, you might want to let Vanessa know that her dreams of starting fresh with you are about to get a lot more expensive." The next 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of war. Marcus moved into the guest bedroom, and we maintained a cold civility around the house. He would make coffee in the morning, and leave a cup for me on the counter. I would do his laundry and fold it neatly in the basket outside his door. We were like polite strangers sharing space while our attorneys filed paperwork and made demands. I had hired Patricia Brennan on a Tuesday. By Friday, she had filed for divorce and requested temporary spousal support, exclusive use of the marital home, and a restraining order preventing Marcus from disposing of any assets without court approval. Marcus's attorney, a man named Richard Fielding, who specialized in protecting wealthy men's assets, responded by questioning the validity of my sacrificed career claims, and suggesting that after 23 years, I should be capable of supporting myself. It was exactly the kind of condescending response I had expected, and it only strengthened my resolve. During those 3 weeks, I also began implementing other plans. I had hired the private investigator, a former police detective named Carmen Rodriguez, who immediately began documenting Marcus and Vanessa's relationship. Carmen was thorough and discreet, following them to restaurants, hotels, and weekend getaways that Marcus thought I knew nothing about. The evidence she gathered was damaging: photos of them holding hands at expensive restaurants, entering and leaving hotels during lunch hours, Marcus using our joint credit card to pay for jewelry that never made it home to me. Carmen had also discovered that Marcus had opened a separate bank account 3 months ago, and had been funneling money into it, clearly preparing for his new life. But the most interesting discovery came when Carmen dug deeper into Vanessa's background. It turned out that my husband wasn't her first married man. 2 years ago, at her previous job in Milwaukee, she had dated her supervisor for 8 months before his wife found out and threatened legal action. The man had chosen his marriage, and Vanessa had quietly left the company and moved to Chicago. She has a pattern, Carmen told me during one of our meetings at a coffee shop downtown. She targets successful older men who are going through midlife transition. She makes them feel young and vital again, gets them to leave their wives, then moves on when the excitement wears off. How do you know she moves on? Because I tracked down the Milwaukee guy. His name is Robert Chen. After his wife threatened to take him for everything, he broke it off with Vanessa. 6 months later, Vanessa was engaged to a different man, a divorced father of 2, who owned a small construction company. What happened to that relationship? Ended when she met someone with more money. She's not looking for love, Mrs. Lewis, she's looking for upward mobility. I absorbed this information while sipping my latte. Does Marcus know any of this? I doubt it. Men like your husband don't ask the right questions when they're infatuated. They hear what they want to hear. Can we prove it? I can document the pattern. I can get statements from the men she's been involved with. Whether that's admissible in divorce court depends on your attorney, but it certainly paints a picture of her character. I decided to sit on this information for the moment. Knowledge was power, and I wanted to deploy it strategically. Meanwhile, Marcus was growing increasingly frustrated with the legal proceedings. He had assumed that once he announced his intention to divorce, things would move quickly and amicably. Instead, he was discovering that extricating himself from 23 years of marriage was complicated and expensive. Your attorney is being unreasonable, he told me one evening as I was cooking dinner for myself. He had been eating takeout for weeks, probably with Vanessa. How so? I asked, not looking up from my stir-fry. She's demanding documentation of every asset, every account, every investment. She wants 5 years of bank statements and tax returns. That sounds standard. It's excessive, and this temporary support amount is ridiculous. $3,000 a month. I can't afford that, and still maintain my own living expenses. Where are you living, Marcus? You haven't moved out yet. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm looking at apartments, expensive ones. I assume you'll want to impress Vanessa. This isn't about Vanessa. Everything is about Vanessa now. He sat down at the kitchen table, looking tired. Janet, can't we find a way to do this that doesn't destroy both of us? I turned to face him. You mean a way that doesn't inconvenience you? That's not what I mean. Isn't. You want me to accept a minimal settlement, so you can start your new life without financial strain. You want me to be grateful for whatever scraps you're willing to throw my way. I want to be fair. Your definition of fair is interesting. Fair would have been discussing your unhappiness with me before you started sleeping with your secretary. Fair would have been suggesting marriage counseling instead of planning your exit strategy. Fair would have been treating me like a partner instead of an obstacle. Marcus rubbed his temple. I know I handled things badly, you think, but we can't change what's already happened. We can only control how we move forward. You're right, and I've decided how I want to move forward, which is, I want you to experience the full consequences of your choice. I want this divorce to be as expensive and drawn out as possible. I want you to understand what it costs to throw away a marriage. You're trying to punish me. I'm trying to protect myself. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment. Vanessa thinks you're being vindictive. I almost laughed. Vanessa has opinions about how I should handle my divorce. She's concerned about how long this is taking. I'm sure she is. It's hard to plan a future when the present is so messy. She's not what you think she is, Janet. What do I think she is? A gold digger, someone who's using me. And what do you think she is? Someone who cares about me, someone who sees potential in me, that you stopped seeing years ago. I turned back to my cooking. If you say so. Don't you want to know what it feels like to be with someone who appreciates you? I remember what that felt like. It felt like the first few years of our marriage, when you still made an effort to be the man I fell in love with. People change, Janet. Yes, they do, but some people change because they grow together, and others change because they give up. Which one are we? You gave up, Marcus. I just didn't realize it until now. That weekend, Carmen called me with new information. Your husband and Vanessa went to a real estate open house yesterday, a condo downtown, listed at $400,000. Are they serious buyer? Serious enough that they filled out a financial pre-qualification form. I have copies. How did you get copies? The listing agent is a friend of mine. The interesting thing is what they put down for their combined income, which was $200,000. But according to my research, Vanessa makes about $45,000, and your husband makes about $130,000. Even if he gets a divorce and starts his consulting firm, there's no way they're making $200,000 in their first year, so they're inflating their income. Either that, or they're counting on assets from your divorce settlement to make up the difference. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. They were spending my money before they even had it. There's something else, Carmen continued. I followed them to a jewelry store after the real estate appointment. What kind of jewelry store? The kind that sells engagement rings. I was quiet for a long moment. Did he buy anything? Not that day, but he had the sales associate show them several rings in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. Using what money? That's the question, isn't? After I hung up with Carmen, I sat in my living room, looking around at the house Marcus and I had bought together 15 years ago. We had chosen it carefully, thinking about our future children, planning for family holidays and dinner parties, and all the life we thought we would build together. Now he was planning to buy a condo with another woman, using money that was rightfully half mine, and proposing to her with jewelry purchased with credit cards I would be responsible for paying off. I called Patricia Brennan. I need to accelerate our timeline, I told her. What's happened? I explained about the real estate applications and the jewelry shopping. He's making major financial commitments based on assets he doesn't have yet. That's actually helpful for our case. It shows intent to dissipate marital assets. Can we stop him? We can request an emergency hearing to modify the restraining order. If he's actively planning to spend marital assets on his girlfriend, the court will take a dim view of that. How long would that take? I can file the motion tomorrow. We could have a hearing within 2 weeks. Do it. Janet, you should know that this will escalate things significantly. Once we start making these kinds of allegations, your husband's attorney will probably advise him to fight back hard. Let them fight. I'm ready. The emergency hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Patricia had submitted evidence of Marcus's secret bank account, the real estate applications, and the credit card charges for expensive dinners and gifts. She had also included Carmen's photographs showing Marcus and Vanessa together at various romantic locations. Marcus was furious when he was served with the emergency motion. He confronted me that evening, his face red with anger. You had us followed, he demanded. I had you investigated. There's a difference. This is harassment. This is protecting my interest. Those photos are private moments in public places. If you wanted privacy, you should have been more discreet. You're trying to make me look like a monster. I'm documenting the truth. If that makes you look like a monster, maybe you should examine your behavior. Janet, this has gone too far. Has it? Or has it just gotten started? The hearing was a revelation. Marcus sat next to his attorney looking pale and uncomfortable while Patricia systematically presented evidence of his financial deception and romantic duplicity. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Torres, listened impassively as Patricia detailed Marcus's attempts to hide assets and plan for a future that depended on money he was hoping to deny me. When Richard Fielding tried to argue that his client was simply planning for his future after the divorce was finalized, Judge Torres cut him off. Mr. Fielding, your client opened a secret bank account while still married and has been diverting marital funds into it. He has applied for a mortgage based on income he doesn't have and assets he hasn't been awarded. He has charged thousands of dollars in expenses related to his extramarital relationship to joint credit cards. This is not future planning. This is asset dissipation and financial misconduct. The judge modified the restraining order to freeze all of Marcus's accounts except for basic living expenses. She also ordered him to provide complete financial disclosure within 30 days and prohibited him from making any major purchases or financial commitments without court approval. As we left the courthouse, Marcus grabbed my arm. "Are you happy now?" he asked. "Not particularly, but I'm protected. You're destroying any chance we had of ending this amicably. You made sure of that when you decided to plan your new life while you were still married to me. What do you want from me, Janet? What will it take for you to stop this? I looked at this man who had shared my bed for over 2 decades, who had promised to love and honor me, who was now looking at me like I was his enemy. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to learn that you can't just discard people when they become inconvenient. I want you to pay for what you've done, and if I can't pay, then you'll learn to live with less, just like you're asking me to do. Vanessa was waiting for Marcus in the parking lot, standing next to her red Honda with her arms crossed. When she saw us approaching, her expression shifted from concern to barely concealed hostility. "How did it go?" she asked Marcus, but she was looking at me. "Not well," Marcus replied. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said pleasantly, "but I'm sure you two will figure out how to adjust your plan." "Mrs. Lewis," Vanessa said, her voice tight with controlled anger, "don't you think you're being a little vindictive?" "Vindictive? No, I think I'm being practical. You're making this much harder than it needs to be." "Am I? Or am I just refusing to make it as easy as you'd like?" Marcus deserves to be happy. Marcus deserves to experience the full cost of his choices. What about what you deserve? I deserve the life I was promised when I married him. Since I can't have that, I'll settle for financial compensation. Vanessa stepped closer, her composure slipping. "You're a bitter, angry woman who can't accept that your marriage is over. You're a naive young woman who thinks love conquers all. We'll see which one of us is right. I know Marcus loves me. Maybe he does. But love doesn't pay for condos or engagement rings or the lifestyle you're planning. We don't need your money to be happy. Then you won't mind if I keep it." Marcus finally intervened. "That's enough. Both of you." But I wasn't finished. "Vanessa, can I give you some advice?" "I don't want your advice. I'm going to give it anyway. Be very careful about tying your future to a man who's shown you how easily he can walk away from promises. Today, it's my marriage he's discarding. Tomorrow, it might be yours. That's not going to happen. That's what I thought too." I walked to my car, leaving them standing in the parking lot. As I drove away, I could see them in my rearview mirror, having what looked like an intense conversation. I wondered if Vanessa was beginning to understand that her fairy tale romance was going to be more expensive and complicated than she had anticipated. That evening, I was surprised to get a phone call from Linda. I saw the court filing online. She said, "You're really going for the throat." "I'm protecting myself." "Good for you. How's Marcus handling it?" "About as well as you'd expect. He's angry that his careful plans are being disrupted. And the girlfriend, getting a reality check about what it costs to be with a man in the middle of an expensive divorce. Think she'll stick around? We'll find out. If she's really in love with him, she'll weather the storm. If she's just looking for easy money and excitement, she'll start looking for her next target." "What's your guess?" I thought about Vanessa's pattern of relationships, her quick exits when things got complicated, her obvious frustration with the legal proceedings. "I think she's already started looking," I said. "Really? Carmen is keeping an eye on her social media and her movement." Young women like Vanessa don't usually have the patience for long, expensive legal battles, especially when they realize that the money they were counting on is going to be tied up in court for years. Exactly. What happens if she leaves him? Then Marcus gets to experience what it's like to face the consequences of his choices alone. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed changes in Marcus's behavior. He was more agitated, taking phone calls at odd hours, leaving the house frequently without explanation. He looked tired and stressed, like a man who was beginning to realize that his grand romantic gesture was going to cost him more than he had bargained for. Then Carmen called with the information I had been expecting. "Vanessa has been spending time with someone new," she reported. "Who?" "A client of the firm where she works. His name is David Weinstock. He's a real estate developer, recently divorced, worth about $3 million. How long has this been going on?" "About a week. They've met for coffee twice and dinner once. Last night they were at the Marriott downtown until almost midnight." "Does Marcus know?" I don't think so. She's been very careful to maintain her routine with him while exploring this new option. Smart girl, what do you want me to do? Keep document. I want to know if this develops into something more serious, and if it does, then I want evidence of it. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Carmen sent me photos of Vanessa and David Weinstock leaving his penthouse apartment together at 7 in the morning. She was wearing the same dress she had worn to dinner with Marcus the night before. I studied the photos, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because my prediction had been correct, and sadness because Marcus was about to learn a very painful lesson about the woman he had chosen over our marriage. I decided to let him discover the truth himself rather than sharing what I knew. It didn't take long. Marcus came home early on a Friday afternoon, something he never did anymore. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard him slam the front door with unusual force. "Janet?" he called out, his voice strained. "In here," I replied. He appeared in the kitchen doorway looking like he had aged 5 years in the past week. His hair was disheveled, his tie was loose and his eyes were red. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" "About the divorce, about moving forward." I turned off the stove and faced him. "What's changed?" "I want to settle this quickly and fairly." "Define fairly." "I want to give you what you're entitled to without dragging this out for years." "And what brought about this change of heart?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Vanessa and I have decided to take a break." "A break?" "She thinks the stress of the divorce is affecting our relationship. She wants to wait until everything is resolved before we make any permanent commitments." I nodded sympathetically. "That's probably wise. Divorce proceedings can be very stressful for everyone involved." "She's moved out of her apartment." "Where is she living?" "With a friend," she said. "I see." Marcus sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "I think I made a mistake, Janet." "Which mistake would that be?" "All of it. The affair, the divorce, thinking that starting over would solve everything." "What makes you think that now?" "Because everything I thought would be simple has turned out to be complicated. Everything I thought would make me happy has made me miserable." I sat down across from him. "Are you saying you want to reconcile?" "I don't know. Maybe. Is that even possible after everything that's happened?" I looked at this man who had been my husband for 23 years, who had betrayed me, humiliated me, and tried to discard me like old furniture. He looked broken and defeated, nothing like the confident man who had brought his mistress to our home and expected me to serve them dinner. "No," I said quietly. "It's not possible." "Why not?" "Because I don't trust you anymore. Because I can't forget that when things got difficult in our marriage, your solution was to find someone else rather than work on us. Because I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. And I don't need someone who sees me as disposable." "I never saw you as disposable." "Didn't you? Then what would you call planning a future with another woman while you were still married to me?" "I call it making a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake, Marcus. It was a choice, a series of choices, and now you have to live with the consequences of those choices." "What if I promise to change?" "You've already shown me who you are. You're someone who runs away when things get boring. You're someone who lies to get what you want. You're someone who tries to rewrite history to make yourself the victim. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. Marriage isn't fair. Divorce isn't fair. But you don't get to decide to throw away 23 years and then take it back when your plan doesn't work out." Marcus put his head in his hands. "So what happens now?" "Now we finish what you started. We get divorced, we divide our assets, and we move on with our separate lives. And you're going to keep fighting for everything." "I'm going to fight for what I'm entitled to, what I've earned, what I deserve after giving up my career and my youth to build a life with someone who threw it all away. I'll cooperate with whatever settlement you think is fair." "It's too late for that, Marcus. You had a chance to be fair when you decided you wanted out. Instead, you tried to manipulate and hide assets, and plan your future with money that was half mine. I know I handled things badly." "You handled things exactly the way I would have expected you to handle them, selfishly and dishonestly." He stood up slowly. "I'll tell my attorney to work with yours on a settlement." "You do that." "Janet?" "Yes, I am sorry, for all of." I looked at him. This man I had once loved completely, and felt nothing but emptiness where that love used to be. "I know you are," I said. "But sorry doesn't undo what's been done." After he left the kitchen, I sat at the table for a long time, thinking about the conversation we had just had. Part of me felt vindicated that my predictions about Vanessa had come true. Another part of me felt sad that it had taken her betrayal for Marcus to realize what he had lost. But mostly, I felt relieved. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt like I could see clearly. I wasn't the bitter ex-wife clinging to a dead marriage. I wasn't the victim of circumstances beyond my control. I was a woman who had learned her worth and was determined to claim it. The next morning, Patricia called with news that Marcus's attorney had contacted her about settlement negotiations. "He wants to move quickly," she said. "Apparently, your husband has had a change of heart about the lengthy litigation, I heard." "What's he offering?" 60% of marital assets, the house, and 10 years of spousal support at $3,500 a month. "And what do you think?" "I think we can do better, but it's a reasonable starting point." Counter with 70%, the house, and 15 years of support at $4,000 a month. "That's aggressive." "So was bringing his girlfriend to my home for dinner." "Fair enough. I'll make the counteroffer." "Patricia?" "Yes, I want this finished before the end of the year. I'm ready to start my new life." "Understood. I'll push for expedited negotiations." As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Excitement about the future, not the bitter satisfaction of revenge, but genuine anticipation for what came next. For the first time in 23 years, I was going to be making decisions based solely on what I wanted, not what someone else needed from me, and that felt like freedom. The settlement negotiations took 6 weeks, but they felt like 6 months. Every day brought new proposals, counter-proposals, and heated discussions between our attorneys. Marcus had initially agreed to cooperate, but as the financial reality of the divorce became clearer, his cooperation wavered. Patricia kept me informed of every development. Marcus's attorney was pushing hard to reduce the spousal support duration and amount, arguing that I was still young enough to rebuild my career. They also wanted to exclude his 401k from the settlement, claiming it was primarily funded before our marriage, which was technically true but ignored the 20 years of contributions made during our marriage. "He's getting desperate," Patricia told me during one of our weekly meetings. "His attorney called me this morning, suggesting we could reduce the spousal support if you agreed to waive any claim to his future business ventures." "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "He's not starting a consulting firm anymore, is he?" "According to his financial disclosure, no, but that could change once the divorce is finalized. Then we maintain our position." "Janet, I need to ask you something directly. Are you holding out for maximum settlement because you need the money, or because you want to make him pay for what he did?" I considered the question carefully. "Both. I do need the money to rebuild my life at 54, but I also want him to understand that betraying someone has a price." "Fair enough, but I want to make sure you understand the costs of continuing to fight. If we go to trial, your legal fees could reach $60,000 or more." "How much would I get in a trial versus accepting their current offer?" "Hard to say. Judges can be unpredictable. You might get more, you might get less." "What's your professional recommendation?" "I think we're close to the best deal we're going to get. 65% of assets, the house, 12 years of support at $3,800 a month. That's a good settlement. But not the maximum." "No, not the maximum." I thought about it for several days. The settlement would give me enough to live comfortably while I figured out what came next. The house would be mine, along with about $500,000 in liquid assets. The spousal support would cover my basic expenses for 12 years, giving me time to either find work or pursue other interests. But there was something else I wanted. Something that wasn't part of the financial negotiation. "I want something added to the settlement," I told Patricia the next week. "What kind of something?" "I want a clause stating that if Marcus remarries within 5 years, his spousal support obligation increases by 50%. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual. Is it legal?" "It's legal, but courts don't usually enforce punitive clauses like that." "Then make it a voluntary agreement. If he wants this settled quickly, he can agree to it." "Why is this important to you?" Because I want him to think very carefully before he makes promises to another woman. I want his next wife to know that his commitment to her is going to cost him." Patricia shrugged. "I'll propose it." To my surprise, Marcus agreed to the clause without argument. His attorney advised against it, but Marcus was so eager to finalize the divorce that he accepted all our terms. The divorce was granted on a cold Tuesday morning in February. I sat in the courtroom listening to the judge read the terms of our settlement, officially dissolving 23 years of marriage in less than 10 minutes. Marcus sat on the other side of the room with his attorney, avoiding eye contact. When it was over, we walked out of the courthouse as strangers. No handshake, no final words, just the end of a life we had built together. Patricia walked me to my car. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said, and realized I meant it. The first few weeks after the divorce were strange. The house felt different, knowing it was entirely mine. I walked through the rooms, deciding what to keep and what to get rid of. Most of Marcus's belongings were already gone, but there were still remnants everywhere. Photos I needed to remove, furniture we had chosen together, wedding gifts that no longer felt appropriate. I hired a decorator to help me redesign the master bedroom. We replaced the furniture, changed the color scheme, and transformed it into a space that felt entirely mine. I did the same with the living room and kitchen, slowly erasing the physical reminders of my marriage. Linda came to visit during the first month, ostensibly to help me organize, but really to make sure I was okay. "You seem different," she said one evening, as we sat in my newly redecorated living room. "Different how?" "Stronger, more confident, like you've remembered who you used to be." "Maybe I have." "What are you going to do now?" It was a question I had been asking myself daily. At 54, with a comfortable settlement, and no immediate financial pressure, I had options I hadn't had in decades. "I'm thinking about going back to school," I said. "School?" "Northwestern has a program for returning students. I could finish my marketing degree, maybe get an MBA. At your age, why not? I have time now, I have resources, and the marketing world has changed so much since I left. I need to catch up anyway." "That's exciting. Or terrifying?" "I'm not sure yet. Probably both." She was right. The idea of going back to school after 30 years was both thrilling and intimidating, but it felt like reclaiming a part of myself that I had set aside for too long. I enrolled in Northwestern's continuing education program that spring, starting with 2 classes to test the waters: marketing in the digital age and consumer psychology. I was nervous the first day, surrounded by students young enough to be my children, but the professors were supportive and my classmates were welcoming. I discovered that my years of life experience gave me a perspective that my younger classmates lacked. While they understood technology intuitively, I understood human nature and long-term consequences. The combination made me a stronger student than I had expected. During this time, I also began hearing rumors about Marcus through mutual acquaintances. He had indeed started a consulting firm, but it was struggling. Without Vanessa's assistance and facing the financial pressure of the divorce settlement, he was having trouble attracting clients and managing the business side of things. Carmen Rodriguez, whom I had kept on retainer for information gathering, confirmed that Marcus was living in a modest apartment and driving a used car. The grand lifestyle he had envisioned with Vanessa had been scaled back significantly. "He looks tired," Carmen reported during one of our monthly check-ins. "Stressed. He's working long hours but not making much money." And Vanessa? Engaged to David Weinstock. They're planning a summer wedding. I felt a twinge of something that might have been sympathy for Marcus, but it passed quickly. He had made his choices, and now he was living with them. As my first semester at Northwestern progressed, I found myself reconnecting with a part of myself I had almost forgotten. I loved the intellectual challenge, the discussions with professors, the satisfaction of mastering new concepts. My grades were excellent, and I decided to pursue the full MBA program. It was during my second semester that I met Robert Chen at a marketing conference in downtown Chicago. The name was familiar, but it took me a moment to place it. "Excuse me," I said, approaching him during a coffee break. "Are you Robert Chen from Milwaukee?" He looked puzzled. "Yes. Do we know each other?" "Not exactly,
but I think we have a mutual acquaintance, Vanessa Richardson. His expression immediately darkened. How do you know Vanessa? She had an affair with my husband. Well, my ex-husband now. Robert stared at me for a moment, then laughed bitterly. You're Janet Lewis, you know who I am. I hired a private investigator after my wife threatened to leave me. He found out about Vanessa's pattern, including her relationship with your husband. What happened with your situation? I chose my marriage. Vanessa disappeared from my life overnight, and 6 months later I heard she was engaged to someone else. And your marriage? Stronger than ever. Turns out nearly losing everything made us both realize what we actually had. We talked for another hour, sharing stories about Vanessa's manipulation tactics and the aftermath of our respective situations. Robert's experience gave me additional perspective on what Marcus had gone through, though it didn't change my feelings about his choices. You know what's interesting? Robert said, as we prepared to return to the conference. Vanessa always presented herself as the victim, the young woman trying to save an older man from his boring life, but really, she was a predator. Marcus wouldn't see it that way. Men like your ex-husband and me, we're easy targets. We're successful enough to be attractive, but insecure enough to be manipulated. She knew exactly what she was doing. Do you think he'll learn from it? Some men do, others just repeat the pattern with different women. As I drove home from the conference, I thought about Robert's words. Marcus had lost Vanessa, his comfortable marriage, and a significant portion of his assets. The question was whether he would use that experience to grow, or whether he would blame everyone but himself for his situation. A few weeks later I got my answer when Carmen called with surprising news. Your ex-husband has a new girlfriend, she reported. Already, her name is Lisa Martinez. She's 32, works as a paralegal at a different law firm. They met at a professional networking event. How long has this been going on? About a month.
She seems nice enough, but she's definitely following the same pattern. Young, ambitious, impressed by successful older men. Has he learned anything? Hard to say. He's being more discreet this time, but the fundamental dynamic looks the same. I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed. Marcus had had an opportunity to examine his behavior and make changes, but instead he had simply found a new version of the same relationship. Meanwhile, my own life was expanding in ways I hadn't anticipated. Through my MBA program, I had connected with other returning students, many of whom were women rebuilding their lives after divorce or major life changes. We formed a study group that gradually became a social circle. One of these women, Sarah Goldstein, had started her own marketing consultancy after her divorce 3 years earlier. She was doing well enough to consider taking on a partner, and she approached me about joining her business. You have exactly the background I need, she told me over coffee one afternoon. Experience from before the digital revolution, but education in current trends. Plus you understand the challenges of starting over at our age. I'm not even finished with my MBA yet. You will be in 6 months. Think about it. I did think about it extensively. The idea of jumping back into the business world was both exciting and terrifying. But Sarah's offer represented exactly the kind of opportunity I had been hoping for. I accepted her proposal conditional on completing my degree, and we began planning our partnership. Sarah handled the creative and strategic aspects of marketing, while I would focus on account management and business development. It felt like a perfect fit. As graduation approached, I reflected on how much my life had changed in less than 2 years. I had gone from being a dependent housewife to an independent woman with her own business prospects and social life. The divorce that had initially felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of something much better. The graduation ceremony was held on a beautiful May afternoon. Linda and several of my new friends attended, cheering as I walked across the stage to receive my MBA. At 55, I was among the older graduates, but I felt younger and more energetic than I had in years. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. As I looked around the table at these women who had become my friends and support system, I realized that I had built something Marcus could never take away from me, a life that was entirely my own. So, what's next? Linda asked as we were finishing dessert. Sarah and I are officially launching our partnership next month. We already have 3 clients lined up. That's wonderful. Are you nervous? Terrified, I admitted, but also excited. You should be proud of yourself, said Karen, another woman from our study group who had gone through a similar transformation. 2 years ago, you were serving dinner to your husband's mistress. Now you're starting your own business. The contrast wasn't lost on me. 2 years ago, I had been Janet Lewis, the perfect wife who made everyone else's life easier. Now I was Janet Lewis, MBA, business owner, independent woman. A few days after graduation, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Marcus. Congratulations on your graduation, he said awkwardly. I saw the announcement in the Northwestern's alumni magazine. Thank you, I replied, surprised to hear from him. I wanted to tell you that I think what you've done is impressive. Going back to school, starting a business, it takes courage. It does. I also wanted to apologize, properly this time, not just for the affair but for taking you for granted all those years. I didn't appreciate what I had. I was quiet for a moment, processing this unexpected conversation. I appreciate you saying that, Mark. I know it doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost. What made you realize that? Watching you rebuild your life, seeing how strong and capable you are. I always knew you were intelligent, but I never understood how much you had sacrificed for our marriage. And what about your new relationship? He was silent for a moment. How did you know about Lisa? Marcus, I know about everything. I've known about everything since the beginning. Right. Well, Lisa and I broke up last week. What happened? She wanted me to leave my apartment and move in with her. When I explained about the alimony payments and why I couldn't afford a nicer place, she lost interest pretty quickly. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you real? I thought about it honestly. Yes, I am. I don't want you to be unhappy, Marcus. I just don't want to be responsible for your happiness anymore. Fair enough. Can I give you some advice? I suppose I owe you that much. Stop looking for someone to make you feel young and excited. Work on becoming someone who is genuinely worth being with. The right person will appreciate who you actually are, not who you pretend to be. That's good advice. I learned it the hard way. After we hung up, I realized that I felt genuinely sorry for Marcus, for the first time since the affair began. Not sorry enough to regret the divorce or the financial settlement, but sorry that he was struggling to find meaning in his life. But that was no longer my problem to solve. Sarah and I officially launched Lewis Goldstein Marketing the following month. Our first major client was a boutique hotel chain that needed help repositioning their brand for younger travelers. It was exactly the kind of challenging, creative work I had missed during my years as a housewife. Working with Sarah was a revelation. She was collaborative rather than competitive, supportive rather than undermining. After 23 years of marriage to someone who saw my success as a threat to his own, it was refreshing to work with someone who celebrated my contribution. Our business grew quickly through word of mouth and professional networks. Within 6 months, we had 5 regular clients and were considering hiring our first employee. I was happier than I had been in decades, but I was also lonely sometimes. Dating at 55 after 23 years of marriage felt like learning a foreign language. I went on a few dates arranged by well-meaning friends, but nothing developed into anything serious. Maybe you're not ready yet, Linda suggested during one of our phone calls. Maybe I'm too picky now, I replied. After everything I've been through, I have very little patience for men who can't meet my standards. What are your standards? Emotional maturity. The ability to commit to something even when it gets difficult. Those seem reasonable. Apparently they're rarer than I thought. As my second year of post-divorce life drew to a close, I took stock of where I was. I owned my home outright, had a successful business partnership, maintained good relationships with friends and family, and had built a life that reflected my values and interests. Most importantly, I had learned that I was capable of far more than I had ever imagined. The woman who had once defined herself entirely through her marriage had discovered that she was perfectly capable of defining herself The divorce settlement that had seemed so important 2 years ago now felt like just one element of my transformation. The money had given me security and options, but the real value had been in learning to fight for myself. On the 2-year anniversary of my divorce, I treated myself to dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. As I sat at a table for one, enjoying excellent food and wine, I reflected on how much my life had changed. 2 years ago, I had been a woman whose husband brought his mistress to their home and expected her to serve them dinner. Tonight, I was a successful businesswoman, celebrating her own achievements. The transformation had required losing everything I thought I wanted in order to discover what I actually needed. And what I needed, it turned out, was to respect myself enough to demand that others respect me too. The waiter brought my dessert and asked if I was celebrating anything special. Independence, I told him. That's worth celebrating, he replied, with a smile. Yes, I thought as I took my first bite of chocolate cake. It absolutely is. 3 years into my new life, I received news that would test everything I had learned about forgiveness and moving forward. Carmen Rodriguez called me on a Thursday morning with information I hadn't requested, but somehow needed to hear. Marcus is in the hospital, she said without preamble. I was in my office at Lewis Goldstein Marketing, reviewing proposals for a new client campaign. What happened? Heart attack. He collapsed at work yesterday. He's stable now, but it was serious. I set down my pen and stared out the window at the Chicago skyline. Is he alone? His sister flew in from Denver. No girlfriend, no wife, just his sister and a few colleagues, who visited. After hanging up with Carmen, I sat quietly for several minutes. My first instinct was relief that it hadn't been worse, followed immediately by confusion about why I cared. Marcus was no longer my responsibility. We barely spoke, except for the occasional practical matter related to our divorce decree, but the thought of him lying in a hospital room, facing his mortality alone, stirred something in me that wasn't quite sympathy, but wasn't indifference either. Sarah knocked on my office door. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. My ex-husband had a heart attack. Oh my God. Are you going to visit him? I don't know. Should I? Do you want to? I considered the question honestly. I think I do, but I'm not sure why. Maybe because despite everything that happened, you shared 23 years of your life with him. That doesn't just disappear. That afternoon, I found myself driving to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I told myself I was just checking on his condition, that I wouldn't necessarily go up to his room, but as I stood in the hospital lobby, I knew I was going to see him. Marcus was awake when I knocked on his room door. He looked older, frailer than I remembered, with wires and monitors attached to his chest. His face showed genuine surprise when he saw me. Janet? What are you doing here? I heard what happened. I wanted to make sure you were okay. That's very kind of you. I sat in the visitor's chair next to his bed. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. The doctors say I need to make some lifestyle changes. What kind of changes? Diet? Exercise? Stress management? Apparently, working 16-hour days and living on takeout isn't sustainable at my age. Imagine that. He smiled slightly. You always were the practical one. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Finally, Marcus spoke again. Janet, I know this might sound strange, but having you here means a lot to me. Why is it strange? Because I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. I've moved past wanting revenge. Marcus, I'm not angry anymore. What are you? I thought about it. Sad, I suppose. Sad that we couldn't figure out how to make it work. Sad that it took almost losing you for us to have a civil conversation. Do you ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't had the affair? Sometimes, but I think we would have ended up divorced eventually anyway. Why? Because we stopped growing together. We stopped challenging each other. We became roommates instead of partners. You think the marriage was already over? I think we were both going through the motions. You just found a way out first. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I've been thinking a lot lately about the choices I made. Not just the affair, but everything leading up to it. And what have you concluded? That I was a coward. Instead of dealing with my unhappiness directly, I created a fantasy about starting over with someone else. What would dealing with it directly have looked like? Counseling, maybe, or honest conversations about what we both needed, or even just admitting that we weren't happy instead of pretending everything was fine. Would you have been willing to do that work? I don't know. Probably not. I was too convinced that the problem was with our marriage, not with me. And now? Now I understand that I take my problems with me wherever I go. His sister Anne arrived while we were talking, and I could see her confusion about my presence. I excused myself, but not before giving Marcus my business card. If you need anything during your recovery, call me, I said. Why would you offer that? Because everyone deserves support when they're facing something difficult. Over the next few weeks, Marcus did call occasionally, never for anything major, just to check in or share updates about his recovery. The conversations were pleasant, but careful, like two people feeling their way toward a new kind of relationship. During one of these calls, he mentioned that his business was struggling more than ever. I had to turn down 3 potential clients because I can't work the hours they require, he said. Have you considered taking on a partner? I've thought about it, but most people want equity, and I can't afford to give up control of the company. What about a contractor arrangement? Someone who could handle specific projects without becoming an owner. I hadn't considered that. It might be worth exploring. There are a lot of experienced consultants who prefer project work to full-time employment. A week later, he called to tell me he had hired a contractor based on my suggestion, and it was working well. You probably saved my business, he said. I'm glad I could help. Why did you help? After everything I put you through? Because your success or failure doesn't affect my life anymore. I can afford to be generous. It was true. My business with Sarah was thriving beyond our expectations. We had hired 2 full-time employees, and were considering opening a second office. I was making more money than I ever had, even during my first career, and I was doing work that challenged and fulfilled me. More importantly, I had built a life that was entirely my own. I had friends who knew me as Janet the businesswoman, not Janet the ex-wife. I had interests and goals that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs or expectations. I had also started dating more seriously. Through a client, I had met Thomas Hartley, a divorced architect who was building his own practice after leaving a large firm. He was 58, thoughtful, and had no interest in recreating his 20s with a younger woman. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared experiences rather than passion and fantasy. We talked about books and travel, compared notes on rebuilding careers in our 50s, and enjoyed each other's company without drama or complications. He seems like a good match for you, Linda observed during one of her visits to Chicago. He is. He's kind, reliable, and treats me like an equal. Those are good qualities. They're essential qualities. I'm done settling for less. Are you in love with him? I care about him deeply. Whether that's love, I'm not sure, but I'm not in a hurry to define it. That's probably why. Thomas and I had been seeing each other for about 6 months when Marcus called with unexpected news. I'm getting married, he announced. I nearly dropped my phone. To whom? Her name is Catherine Walsh. She's a widow, 51 years old, has 2 grown children. We met at my physical therapy clinic. How long have you been seeing her? About 4 months. I know it seems fast, but when you've been through what I've been through, you learn to recognize something real when you find it. Congratulations. I hope you'll be very happy. Thank you. Jan. Yes, I need to ask you something. The clause in our divorce settlement about increased spousal support if I remarry within 5 years. What about it? I was hoping you might consider waiving it. I was quiet for a moment, thinking about the implication. The clause had been my insurance policy, my way of making sure Marcus thought carefully before making promises to another woman, but it had also been born out of anger and a desire to control his future choices. Tell me about Catherine, I said. She's nothing like Vanessa. She's my age, financially independent, has her own life and interests. She's not looking for someone to rescue her or fund her dreams. What is she looking for? Companionship, someone to share the next chapter of life with, someone who understands that real partnership means supporting each other through good times and difficult ones. And what are you looking for? The same thing. I'm done trying to recapture my youth. I want to build something real with someone who sees me clearly, flaws and all. How do you know she sees you clearly? Because I told her everything, about the affair, about losing you, about the mistakes I made.
and she's still here. I thought about the conversation for several days. The financial impact of waiving the clause would be significant. It would cost me nearly $20,000 a year in additional support payments, but the money felt less important than the principle. Marcus had hurt me deeply, but he had also paid a significant price for his choices. He had lost his marriage, a substantial portion of his assets, and several years of happiness, while he learned difficult lessons about himself. If he had genuinely changed, if he had found someone who would hold him accountable, then perhaps he deserved a chance at happiness, without the financial burden of his past mistakes. I called Patricia Brennan to discuss the legal implications of waiving the clause. "You're not required to do this," she reminded me. "The clause was part of a legally binding agreement." "I know, but I'm considering it anyway." "Why?" "Because holding on to anger is exhausting, and I don't need the extra money to live well." "You realize this could set a precedent. If he divorces again, and remarries, you won't have the same leverage. If he divorces again, and remarries, that will tell me everything I need to know about whether he actually learned anything." I agreed to meet with Marcus and Catherine before making my final decision. We had dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown, and I was immediately struck by the difference in dynamics from my dinner with Marcus and Vanessa 3 years earlier. Catherine was confident without being defensive, interested in my perspective without being deferential. She asked thoughtful questions about my business and congratulated me on building a new career. She also spoke honestly about her concerns about marrying someone who had a history of infidelity. "Marcus has been very open about his past mistakes," she told me, "but I've also made it clear that I won't tolerate any deception or divided loyalties. I've been through one difficult marriage, and I'm not interested in repeating those patterns." "What makes you think this will be different?" I asked. "Because we've both learned from our mistakes. Because we're at an age where we know what we want and don't want, and because we're choosing each other based on reality, not fantasy." Marcus was quieter during dinner, letting Catherine take the lead in most conversation. But when he did speak, it was with a humility I had never seen in him before. "I know I don't deserve another chance at happiness," he said as we were finishing dessert, "but Catherine is willing to give me one, and I don't want my past financial obligations to impact her future." "The support payments aren't that burdensome," I said. "It's not about the money, it's about starting fresh without the shadow of my mistakes hanging over us." I looked at this man I had once loved, then hated, and now felt something approaching neutrality. He looked older but not defeated, chastened but not broken. Whether he had genuinely changed, or was simply better at hiding his flaws, remained to be seen. But Catherine seemed like someone who wouldn't tolerate the kind of behavior that had destroyed our marriage. "I'll waive the clause," I said. Both Marcus and Catherine looked surprised. "Are you sure?" Catherine asked. "I'm sure, but I want something in return." "What?" Marcus asked warily. "I want you to promise me that if you ever feel tempted to stray again, you'll end your marriage first. Don't put Catherine through what you put me through." "I promise. I want you to promise that you'll go to counseling if your marriage hits rough patches instead of looking for escape routes." "We're already planning to do that, and I want you to remember that the choices you make affect people other than yourself. Your actions have consequences that ripple out beyond your own life." "I understand." The legal paperwork to waive the clause took 2 weeks to complete. When it was finalized, I felt lighter somehow, as if I had been carrying a weight I hadn't realized was there. Thomas noticed the change immediately. "You seem different lately," he said as we were walking along Lake Michigan one evening. "Different? How?" "More peace, like you've resolved something that was bothering you." I told him about waiving the clause and about Marcus's upcoming marriage. "That was generous of you," he said. "It was practical. Holding on to anger was taking up energy I could use for better things." "Is that why you did it?" "Practicality." "Partly, but also because I realized that my happiness isn't dependent on his misery. I can wish him well without it costing me anything." "That's a mature perspective." It took me a while to get there. Marcus and Catherine were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at a country club outside the city. I wasn't invited, nor did I expect to be, but Marcus sent me a photo and a note thanking me again for waiving the clause. In the photo they both looked genuinely happy but also realistic about what they were undertaking. There was no starry-eyed romance, no sense that they were embarking on a fairy tale adventure. They looked like two middle-aged people who had chosen each other thoughtfully and were prepared to do the work that marriage requires. A year later, I married Thomas in my backyard, surrounded by close friends and family. It was a small ceremony, elegant but not elaborate, focused on the commitment we were making rather than the party we were throwing. Linda served as my maid of honor, and during her toast, she mentioned how far I had come since my divorce. 3 years ago, Janet was serving dinner to her husband's mistress, she said. Today she's marrying someone who treats her like the remarkable woman she is. That's not just a happy ending, that's just. As I looked around at the faces of people who knew and supported me, I realized that Linda was right. I had served Marcus and Vanessa dinner, but in the end, I had served them something much more powerful: consequences. And in learning to demand those consequences, I had discovered my own worth. Thomas and I honeymooned in Italy, visiting small towns and vineyards, taking our time and enjoying each other's company, without agenda or urgency. It was the kind of trip I had dreamed of taking with Marcus but never had, and I was grateful that I had waited to experience it with someone who truly wanted to be there with me. Louis Goldstein Marketing continued to grow, and Sarah and I eventually opened that second office, this one in Milwaukee. I found deep satisfaction in helping other businesses tell their stories and reach their customers, work that felt meaningful in a way that keeping house and managing social calendars never had. On the 5th anniversary of my divorce, I threw a party. Not a bitter celebration of Marcus's downfall, but a joyful acknowledgement of my own transformation. I invited all the friends I had made during my journey, all the people who had supported me as I rebuilt my life. As I stood in my backyard, looking at the faces of people who knew me as I really was, rather than as someone's wife, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not gratitude for the pain I had endured, but gratitude for the strength I had discovered in myself. I had learned that being discarded by someone who no longer valued me wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I was the author of my own life, rather than a supporting character in someone else's. The woman who had once served dinner to her husband's mistress had become someone who served justice instead. Not the harsh, vengeful kind of justice that destroys everyone it touches, but the patient, strategic kind that protects what matters and builds something better from the ruins of what came before. I had discovered that the best revenge wasn't making Marcus pay for his betrayal. The best revenge was building a life so fulfilling that his betrayal became irrelevant. As the evening wound down and Thomas helped me clean up, I reflected on how different my life was from what I had expected 5 years earlier. I had been married to someone who saw me as convenient rather than essential, who valued me for what I did, rather than who I was. Now I was married to someone who appreciated my intelligence, supported my ambitions, and treated me as an equal partner in all aspects of our life together. I had work that challenged me, friends who respected me, and a sense of purpose that came from within rather than from my relationship to someone else. Most importantly, I had learned that I could trust myself to handle whatever life brought my way. I had survived betrayal, divorce, financial uncertainty, and the challenge of starting over in my 50s. I had not just survived but thrived. The dinner I had served Marcus and Vanessa that night 4 years ago had been the last meal I would ever prepare for people who didn't appreciate what I was offering. Every meal since then had been shared with people who valued my presence as much as my cooking. That, I realized, was the real transformation. Not just learning to demand respect, but learning to recognize it when it was freely given. Not just fighting for what I deserved, but creating a life where I was surrounded by people who never made me question my worth. I had served them dinner, but in the end, I had served myself something far more valuable: the knowledge that I was capable of creating exactly the life I wanted, with or without anyone else's permission. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.